Dr. Gina, so lovely to spend this time together. Just in these few moments, we got connected through a mutual friend, but I can already tell we're going to get along. I just feel this energy. So for people watching YouTube, you can probably feel that, and hopefully you can feel it by audio as well. So I'm so happy to have this conversation because your book is titled Frazzlebrain, and I'm sure I'm not the only one to tell you that that just hits, right? I think for me it's also frenetic brain, but nonetheless, I can really the word speaks clearly. And you're coming from this point of view of a licensed psychotherapist. You're doing some executive coaching, right? And you're a corporate trainer. You work with adults now, you used to work with youth and then you put all of this work into writing. I see you've done lots of different publications and you put this book together, right? So tell us
Right.
a little bit more about, how did you get into this? What was sort of your spark to get into this work in the initially?
Well, I've got such a broad background and it's such a good big question. So I'll try to condense it for your listeners. But I have a broad background. I worked in juvenile diversion. So I worked with young people who were in the juvenile justice system,
Mm,
criminal offenders, worked in probation, and then went into doing treatment for incarcerated youth. And then out of that went into private practice, and we did violence prevention in the workplace and counseling for people who have
mm,
witnessed homicides. And so we're dealing with people who have had big traumatic experiences with
yeah.
big emotions, right? So that was such great grounding in seeing people who have been through some of the worst things anyone could go through, and
Mm,
what is the emotional arc to healing? You know, how does one
mm,
go from having a normal day to having everything blow up in your life to uh, going through all those feelings to coming through the other side and being able to put together a life where you can access happiness again, you know? So
mm,
that was really good training for become a psychotherapist because we meet people at all different on all different points on that continuum of emotion.
mm,
Um, and so one of the things I noticed in recommending books for my clients, you know, I always recommend a good self-help book. People were coming in all the time saying they feel frazzled.
mm,
And a lot of that is what we would clinically call anxiety or a range of anxiety disorders, right? And then also a lot of that falls under anger management and stress management because underneath anxiety, there's always a lot of anger, a lot of feeling
mm,
of threat, right? A feeling
yes.
of, and then sometimes people who present with anger issues, because we did a lot of anger management programs. We did anger management programs for the FBI and all these different organizations that deal with very intense experiences, human experiences. So they've got all this anger, and underneath anger is anxiety, fear, is fear, and so the anger is there to sort of try to protect us. So fear and anger are sort of this pair that come together all the time,
Mm,
anxiety and anger. And then what happens when we have life stresses happen, life stress like a physical illness, a life stress like a car accident, losing a job, um, having our uh, being a victim of violence or something. We have these life stressors happen, and then it just amplifies. So you have this anger, anxiety, and stress coming together. And it could be a minor stress like a plumbing, you know, leak in your house or you know, that throws off your whole schedule. And now everything's very, very chaotic. So this is how life happens to us. It happens to us in
mm,
as we're going along, and then we realize that the combination of the anxiety and anger and stress creates this condition called frazzlebrain that I call frazzlebrain that is really sort of this feeling of intense pressure, like I have to get
mhm,
something done, I have to do it quickly. Um, also with a lot of agitation and yet a little bit of fatigue too, because there's this
Mm,
sort of foggy feeling of, I don't know what to do, but I have to do something and I have to do it now. So that's this sort of frazzled, anxious state,
mm,
and it comes with some irritability, and so forth. So a lot of folks, especially during COVID, I mean, that was what I was hearing all the time from people when I was working during COVID is uh, just feeling frazzled.
mm,
Healthcare workers feeling frazzled, parents feeling frazzled, and so the other thing I found is when I referred people to self-help books for anxiety, it often didn't really tackle the anger and stress aspect of it. And also, the first few chapters of a lot of these anxiety self-help books are all about checklist and diagnosing yourself, and you're reading all these symptoms. And many of my clients just threw the book against the wall and said, I can't finish this thing because it just makes me
mm,
stressed out to read it, you know? So I
yeah.
realized people needed a calming book that wasn't stressful to read. It addresses, so Frazzlebrain addresses their real intense feelings, but offers immediate tools to cope. So you don't have to get to chapter 7, before you start getting some kind of help. And it's meant to sort of calm you down while you're reading it.
Mm,
So using calming words, calming language, calming techniques, and things like that. So that's how the book Frazzlebrain came about, and I'm getting lots of really good feedback that people are finding help from it. And sometimes we need more than a book, obviously. Sometimes we need a community of people to talk to. We need therapists. We need, social support.
right.
But a book can be a helpful tool.
Yes. Great. So we'll dive into more of the techniques, but I want to go back to I'm so curious when you're talking about the very beginning, saying you were working with the toughest of youth.
Hmm.
I'm so curious about what you seem so grounded and calm and gentle. And I'm curious how you were able to, or how you got into it, first of all, and how you were able to manage your own wellness and mental capacity while working with such difficult children. Because we work with teachers here, right, at Kids Yoga Stories, and as a teacher substitute, I see there are some children in the classrooms who are
Hmm.
extremely dysregulated and having a
Yeah.
really hard time. And teachers do not have this psychotherapy background. So I'm curious about how did you cope with it in the beginning?
Well, I think I was really curious about helping people who really didn't have anybody. And a lot of these kids,
Mm,
when I was working with incarcerated youth, I was so struck by I had respect for them, which is kind
mm,
of interesting. Um, because they would say things to me like, this is the safest I've ever felt being
mm,
incarcerated. There's somebody there to protect me if I get beat up. I get 3 meals a day. I get a clean bed to sleep in. I've got somebody concerned about my education. So it opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of the teachers are teaching kids who are unhoused.
mm,
They leave school, they may not be getting 3 meals a day, they may not have a bed to sleep in, they may be living in a very chaotic environment where their parents don't know where the next meal is coming from or if they're going to make a living. It's really hard to get a job when you're unhoused because you don't have an address.
mm,
You know, sometimes you can't even afford a phone to get a call back for a job interview. So a lot of those things really opened my eyes to the fact that some people are really in survival mode and that those kids are just trying to do the best that they can. And I grew to have some respect for them. And then a lot of the kids, for a time, I worked in in residential treatment programs, and we'd get these kids who were convicted of criminal offenses, and they were assigned to a year or more in a residential therapeutic community.
Mm.
And we would have a kid come in who I remember one in particular. His dad was a drug lord, and basically a drug lord, meaning, he drove Rolls Royces and spent a lot of money, and he had guns and was selling drugs and all over. And his son was 15 and was his second in command. And father bought his son prostitutes and taught him to shoot and taught him to be a big tough guy and taught him to abuse his mother. Women were nothing and men were everything. And so this kid comes in and he's 15 years old and probably weighs, 110 pounds, and he's 6 feet tall, this beanpole of a kid. And I'm pretty short, so he was towering above me. And he comes in and he's just like, he's a tough guy. He's gonna knock me around, you
Mm.
know? And I'm not telling him what to do. And so the advantage of these milieu therapies is that I push a button and four guys take him to a padded room, and
Mhm.
he can just thrash about and not hurt himself or anyone else. And then he's told, if he complies, he's going to get some privileges and he's going to get to be a lot happier. If he doesn't, then he's going to end up in the padded room for a while. So I watched this kid come in with, just a wild animal, completely out of control,
Mm.
raging. Um, and we would just go, okay, it's dinner time, you can't be doing that. If you want to eat dinner here, if you want to talk to the other kids, within 6 months, he was the sweetest, most cooperative, most socially appropriate kid in the whole cottage. We would have a cottage of, maybe 10 kids. They each had a bedroom and
Mm.
a community milieu, and he went to therapy. And we took away all of the music with profanity that he had, all of the t-shirts that had drug paraphernalia on them. He wasn't allowed um, to do any of that he had been encouraged to do by his parents. So I think teachers, of course, when you're a teacher, your mission, you're not in a place where you can do all of that, right? So your mission is really to try to get this child to perform at grade level so that they can advance in their schooling. And so when you have somebody, acting out, you do have to hopefully send them to the principal or have somebody intervene so that you can teach, the other kids. Um, and so teachers are my heroes. I work actually with a lot of teachers. I have a lot of teachers in my family, and I hear all the stories, so I know what they're going through. Um, and it's very hard right now because of a lack of support for teachers. But what you can do, I think, as a teacher is a lot, and teachers do change people's lives. And I've heard that from many of my clients that it was that one teacher that
Mhm.
changed the course of their life. And a lot of them as adults even live with regret that they didn't that they were so difficult, you know.
Mm. Yeah.
But this one teacher who talked to them like they were a person really helped. So I think the biggest thing I learned is to talk to people like they're individuals, and to talk to people with compassion, and to regulate your own emotions so that the child can borrow from your strength. So that if you're calm, the child has something to ground them.
Mm.
Um, and so sometimes, yeah, speaking with a soft, confident voice, um, speaking to them with respect, even if they're behaving outrageously, um,
I think
saying things to a child like, I know you can, I know you can do better than this.
Yeah. I get this intellectually, but I also
Yeah,
know that for us parents and educators, it's literally impossible. Like the word we've been hearing for years is drowning. Not so much frazzled, but drowning.
right.
So we're
Drowning.
not even at the point of frazzled. You know, it's worse than that
Right,
because we have the pressures
right.
of the curriculum, the parents, you know, and we're often a lot of teachers are going home and raising their own family or caring for their parents or whatever, right? Or administration. And you have, you know, between 20 and 30 children in your classroom, right? And this is only
You can't
one
give them
of
all
it. Yeah.
an hour
So
of your time. Yeah.
yeah. So I've been personally very recently really exploring and researching about anger because I never
Right.
knew myself as an angry person until I really had a
Mhm.
child, and now both my daughter and my husband have just a larger spectrum of emotions, as you say, than I ever did. You know, I'm a British Canadian, you know, pretty gentle soul, and my daughter, my husband is just wild, and I've seen in the classroom. So I'm curious about, again, coming back to that, what you went through. No doubt you must have felt scared, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
angry because you think, you know, angry at how dare that dad treat his kid
Oh,
like that? Like
oh
how
yeah.
dare
Yeah.
he be so disrespectful? Like there must have been for you personally a lot of rage and stress as well and fear for your own. So
Hmm.
in those moments, do you remember if you can go back to those moments? How did you cope, even though you had a whole toolkit of strategies, right? And you're working with others, but how do you in those moments deal?
Yeah. I mean, I think that fundamentally we have to find our own reason, our own why. Why am I doing this?
Mm,
You know, it's bigger than me. This cause of trying to help keep kids out of the criminal justice system or keep kids from committing suicide or keep kids from acting out violently or whatever the problem is we're trying to solve, it's bigger than me, right? So I do have to be safe enough to do my work, right? So in the case of the milieu therapy, we do have backup people that help with security. I do think that is a huge problem in schools now with teachers not feeling secure and
hmm.
not feeling supported. And we must support them. Parents must support teachers.
Yes.
It's really critical to our society because kids need to feel like there are strong authority figures that they can respect. And I noticed even working with the criminal justice system that if the person in charge is bending the rules, it teaches the kids that their rules don't matter, you know.
Mm,
So they respected the people that arrested them because they knew they screwed up,
mm,
and it gave them something to believe in because many of these kids grow up in these chaotic environments where there's no rules. So having rules is very, very helpful. But having support for teachers who are saying, and I've heard from some teachers that they're not even allowed to send somebody to the principal's office, or they're not even allowed to like discipline some kids in certain situations. Well,
yeah,
that doesn't create a safe environment for anybody.
right.
and and so we do need to feel to back up our teachers and give them that support. Those are bigger structural issues that maybe we need to just keep working on, whether it's looking at the economics of education or whatever. There's a lot of bigger issues, but when you're the person in the classroom, there are tools that you can use in terms of managing your own anger. I do think the first thing, and it was hard for me to myself as a therapist to actually acknowledge how stressful my job is. Teachers, it's like often a calling, right? It's a calling to be a teacher. Maybe you had teachers you adored growing up. You wanted to be that person for some young person, for young people. And then you find yourself in this situation where your impossible demands are made of you, just absolutely impossible demands. And it makes you angry, it makes you frustrated, it makes you not be able to be the teacher you want to be in the classroom, not be able to be the person you want to be. It calls you into that. So I was just doing a program with journalists because journalists have the same issue. It's like now there's just all this pressure. Journalists are being murdered, journalists,
Mm.
therapists, teachers, mental health providers, public health figures, healthcare providers. There's just attacks on all of these systems. And we have to acknowledge that this is really stressful, the work you do. And I skipped over that myself. I was just like,
Mm.
no, this is just another day at work. And then it finally hit me like, I need to really give myself this compassion. So one of the things I did is I took a compassion cultivation course, and then I volunteered for another study on mindful self-compassion. So I took several weeks of compassion cultivation. Um, it's basically mindfulness meditation with a focus on compassion
Is
for
that with
yourself and others.
Kristen Neff? Is that the
Neff,
mindful
well,
self-guide?
she's one of the pioneers in mindful
Yeah.
self-compassion, her and Chris Germer.
Yeah.
I studied with Dr. Janina Scarlett, who's did superhero therapy. She's great. Yeah, I took some courses with some really great teachers, and just that piece of city, and the first group was we were all healthcare professionals of some sort, either mental health surgeons, and COVID just did a number on everyone in healthcare and mental health care, and teachers, right? And students and parents. So we're all still living with the aftermath of that whole period. So what we learned is that just that first step of just holding yourself with the knowledge that this is really hard, and then
Mm.
getting back to what is my why here? What is my why am I doing this? You know, is the purpose bigger than me? And can I rally for that? I have to care for myself first, though. I have to care for myself first. So I do think, and then we have to let go of what we don't have control over.
Mm.
So sometimes it's just doing what you can with what you have, and even if what you have isn't enough, right?
Mm.
And and feeling like that's okay for now, right? That's okay for now. You're
Mm.
showing up. You're doing your job. Um, but it does start with self-care. And the other relationship I have with anger is a really respectful relationship. I think sometimes people assume that anger is a bad emotion. You're not supposed to express it. And especially for women, you get in big time trouble for expressing anger.
Mhm.
And it's a very unfeminine emotion. Men are allowed to be angry, and it's taken seriously. Women are angry and they're hysterical. Um, and we don't like angry people. We want to move away from angry people, and women like to be liked, and we want to be soothing and nurturing and comforting and right and making everybody feel good. Um, well, anger is there as a signal, just like physical pain, to tell us something is wrong. It's absolutely necessary to pay attention to anger, give it a lot of respect, and then identify what it is. Where is the injury here, right? I was just working with a school administrator. I can't give the specific details, but there was a very threatening incident that occurred that this person handled brilliantly. And yet there was public outcry and criticism, because everybody panics when there is an
Mhm.
emergency in a school, and everybody blames the person in charge. And even when the person in charge did everything brilliantly and protected everyone, um, because people get anxiety and they get anger, they attack the public facing person. And that caused a secondary trauma for this already traumatized leader,
Mm.
um, who was traumatized by this incident. Because anytime we're exposed to something very, very scary, it's a trauma,
Mhm.
right? Something potentially life threatening, right? Again, we don't want to skip over that acknowledgement that this is traumatic sometimes. Teachers have to deal with violence in the classroom sometimes, right? Or have to deal with threats, or have to deal with um, an unstable, mentally ill child having a meltdown.
Mm.
And it's traumatic. It's traumatic, right? And it's hard to witness this. It's hard to feel like you're responsible for it. And then the aftermath of that is being criticized for your response to that. Um, and all of that. So that's where we need support. One of the things I was taught in graduate school, which I think is great, is we all need a
Yeah, right.
professional cuddle group, right? A safe space, not necessarily for physical cuddling, but sometimes a hug really helps. But a safe space where you can just say, "Man, this was a day from hell,"
Yeah.
and just hear me out, and just acknowledge
Mm.
acknowledge that it was really hard, and that I need repair. I need to repair.
Yeah.
I need to recover.
Yeah, I want to go back to your strategy you were talking about, right? That you starts with the recognition, start with
Hmm.
understanding where it's coming from. And not only
Right.
is our jobs as parents and teachers really difficult, but also it's the moments. Not only is the
Yeah.
role, but as you say, is the moments like what happened today? What happened right now? You know, and
Hmm.
then looking at the common humanity piece of the mindful self-compassion, thinking this is hard for all
Everybody.
teachers and
Yeah.
educators, mental health professionals, health practitioners. So we're not alone. When you start to think of that, and then you think about your why, and then you said the self-compassion, the hand on heart, that feeling of I'm okay. Where's my fear coming from, or where's my anxiety coming from? It's scary. I mean,
Right.
I feel it, right? I'm scared sometimes my own house when my daughter's flipped her lid or whatever, and then when I flip my lid, which isn't, I'm the kind of person in yoga, the sister science of yoga is Ayurveda, and we have three body types. Vata, Kapha, and Pitta. Mine is Vata. So my way of dealing with anger is I'm fine, 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 then I flip my lid. And that
Hmm.
is scary to me that I've expressed rage, and
Hmm.
so the hand on heart, give myself self-compassion of, how human of me. I am doing my best. And as you
Yeah.
say, I'm not used to raging. And I also think, as a side note, it's probably also because of going through perimenopause, our estrogen is reducing. And, so we don't have as much of the caring piece of us, right? That we're entering a stage of with less estrogen, we're accessing more of our masculine energy to some extent.
Hmm.
And that I think that's probably also why I'm experiencing these bigger feelings. And as you say, it's not that there's anything wrong, it's a signal, but it's having to unroll 50, 40, 50 years of, as you say, women, girls, we're not supposed to express anger, right? So
Hmm.
how do we embrace anger in a more sacred, loving, compassionate way, right?
Right. I mean, it's a teacher. I mean, I think when you get to the point where you feel rage, you really need to acknowledge that something is really troubling you and threatening you, right? And that is our survival skill. And so that could be something threatening you in terms of a relationship with your family or with your daughter, or if your daughter's
Mm,
losing it or your husband's losing it. And now, you've gotten to the end of your patience. You physically are going through changes, right? And so again, that the compassion piece comes in. The anger doesn't come out of a vacuum. It comes from an
mm,
actual place of acknowledge the need, the pain here. There is
mm,
something that has to be addressed. And that might be your right to have your own vulnerability too,
mm. You're right.
right? We're so used to having, as women, feel like we have to hold the weight of the world on our own shoulders and be the
Mm,
resilient one and be the nurturing one and be the one that's comforting everyone else, right? Well, sometimes the weight of that is too much, and our
mm,
rage is telling us, look, I need a break. I need people to pay attention to what's bothering me now. um, I need to acknowledge it myself, because if it's rage that sneaks up on you, you didn't see it coming. Maybe there's something you need to pay attention to, right? That for
yeah.
your own needs. I think that it's not anger that's the problem. It's how we are expressing it. Is it
Mm,
effective? Are we expressing our anger in an ineffective way to get our needs met, to address the problem?
mm,
And so what we teach in our anger management is not to stuff your anger, avoid your anger, deny your anger, but to express it in effective ways. So sometimes if we're feeling like we are raging, sometimes, there was a comedy show called, I think it was called Happiness or something like that. It's hilarious. There was a hilarious scene where a mom is just totally fed up and she's driving her car and she stops at a stop sign and she's just screaming and pounding on the steering wheel, just screaming in her car. And she turns to her right and looks at another woman next to her stopped at the stop sign doing the exact same thing.
right.
And, and I do think sometimes we do need to just go for a run, or we need to get out of the house. Do not drive while raging. It's not a good idea, but some people can do it safely. But it's a good idea to sometimes just get the feelings out of your body because it's part of our animal brain.
Mm,
We are reinforced by, screaming, biting, growling, scratching. It's very animal, instinctual behavior. And so we don't want to cause damage when we're angry, right? We want to honor it with respect, and channel it in ways that are effective. And we can learn how to do that.
yeah. I love it. I love it. And I think it's not as, thinking about Gabor Mate, I was just listening to one of his talks yesterday, and also the book, The Body Keeps a Score. I can never
Yeah, that's
say,
a great book by,
yeah, I
yeah,
can never say the author's name.
Vander Kolk. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So thinking about their work and others is that if we don't address the fear, the trauma, these big feelings and experiences we've had, it's going to sit in our body, right? It's going to,
Hmm.
and I've been doing a lot
Yeah.
of energy work and I can feel it. It's not only my physical body, but it's in my energy body, right? And I know you do a lot of meditation and mindfulness, right? And you're a
Hmm.
big believer in taking a deep breath. But what's that next step for you, right? You teach your clients, you work with your clients on the strategy piece, right? To recognize, take a deep breath, and then what's that cognitive piece that you marry together with the breath?
Well, I always encourage people to practice daily stress management. Um, so, so daily stress management is something that I urge people to do, just like brushing your teeth, taking a bath, shower, getting dressed, eating. It's sort of as essential. And so that might include a meditation practice, physical exercise of some sort. If you're not getting it in your work, some people get plenty of exercise in their work. Waiters, they move a lot, walk miles every day. Nurses walk miles every day. But some of us don't. So having kind of core practice of stress management, including meditation, exercise, um, doing something that calms your nervous system, reading books, whatever. Um, attending to your physical needs to soothe the nervous system. So we're talking about regular strategies of touching base with calmness inside of yourself every day,
Yeah.
peace of calm every day. What you're doing with that is you're training your brain to access that very quickly. And experienced meditators can do that very quickly, just like experienced athletes have a quick cardio recovery rate compared to people who don't exercise. So if you don't exercise and you walk up that flight of stairs, your heart rate takes a lot longer to get back to normal than an athlete who might just leap up those stairs and their heart rate normalizes quickly. So people who are meditators can allow their nervous system to get to calm very quickly after an arousal experience. And our
Mm.
nervous system is built for arousal and then calm. So it's not the arousal that's the problem, it's staying aroused chronically. Aroused meaning high blood pressure, heart rate, elevated nervous energy, constant nervous energy,
Mm.
that's where the harm to the body comes in. Um, so you can with daily stress management practices, and it could be just 20 minutes in a massage chair if you have one, or
Yeah.
you know but so it doesn't have to be spending hours and hours every day relaxing, because we don't have that time, most of us. um, but you have to start with that, and then the cognitive piece is really important to normalize that life is hard, and life is hard for everyone. At any given point in time, any one of us could be symptomatic for a mental illness, depending on what's
Mm.
happening in our lives. And it is true that at any given point in time, somebody's life might be blissful and everything's going great and they're winning awards and their kids are winning awards and they're all healthy and, the house looks beautiful and, blip in time. And then next week, the kid's in the emergency room with a broken arm. And then the next week,
Yeah.
so,
Right.
so any one of us at any given point in time could be really, really suffering. And that's part of our human condition. So if we normalize that, like, oh, my grandson broke his leg, little first time skiing, he broke his leg, oh, 6-year-old grandson, and and now he's back and he's on the all-star team and his baseball team and he's running and he's fine, right? So this is how life comes at us. And
Mm.
so if we can, instead of going, oh my gosh, this is a disaster, oh my gosh, this is
Mm.
terrible, we can just go, this is
Catastrophizing,
life,
right?
this is
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
So the catastrophizing words, right? Or I think one of the things women typically do is self-blame, right?
Mm.
I should have prevented this. I should have seen this coming, or I'm failing. Men do this too, but women tend to heap on a lot more of a sense of responsibility for other people's emotions.
Yeah.
Um, we heap that on ourselves, the responsibility for that unnecessarily, I think. So that's part of the cognitive piece then is I'm not responsible for everyone's happiness. I can maybe help create some conditions for happiness to occur. I can plan a birthday party for my child. However, there is no guarantee that my child will have a good time, or any of the other children at the party will have a good time, right?
Right.
They have to
Yes.
bring themselves to the situation. And any mother who's planned birthday parties knows I've had ones that were like two kids were injured ice skating. It was not a good party.
Right. Yeah.
But we are doing our best trying to create the conditions for something to happen. We can't control all the variables. So I think acceptance of reality on its terms
Yeah.
is a really good cognitive thing to remind yourself. Okay, this is my new reality. The
Yeah.
quicker I can react to this new reality and not react, but
Yeah.
accept the reality, the better my coping is going to be.
Yeah.
So I've learned to just say that to myself. Oh, new scenario. What I expected is not happening. This is what's happening now. What's the best way to cope with this particular thing?
Yeah. I love it.
It
Thank you so
resets
much.
your brain.
Gina,
Oh, you're
you've
welcome.
shared so much. What would you say as your parting words? What's the one thing that you've seen in all your years of experience and all your clients? What's the one piece of advice if it's people for listening? How can they cope with their anger?
Well, I do think one of the best things to tell ourselves when we're suffering is that this is temporary.
Mm,
When we're suffering, it feels almost like it could be a permanent life sentence in some ways. Um, this is a moment in time. It's there to teach me something. I can learn from this. I can get through this.
mhm.
When we're thinking that, we might not know how to get through it, but if we're saying, I can learn how to cope with this, um, we're aiming our attention in a healthy way, and we're
Mhm.
leading with hope, and hope is healthy. So even if you don't know how to get through something, just telling yourself, I can figure out how to get through this
Yes. Love
is
it.
a really great handle to hold you through the chaos of it.
Yeah. My mom used to say, "This too shall pass." All the time, right? And I think about the mindfulness activity where you zoom out, and so I think that
Yeah,
goes along with that is how do we zoom out and see not just this moment, but this month, this year, or even where I'm sitting in this room to my city, to my country, to zoom out and see where it is in the continuum, that it isn't such a huge event. It's only, as you say, one blip along our journey, right? Yeah, thank you
right. And
so
we
much.
You're welcome. And if we do get stuck on a thought and just obsess about it over and over again,
Yeah.
it's helpful to get help, ask somebody for help to kind of get
Absolutely.
unstuck.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so now how do we find you online? I think your book, Frazzlebrain, is available on Amazon or probably any of your places you get your books. But where else do we find you online and sort of what's next for you?
Thank you. You can find me at frazzlebrain.com, and all my social media links are there. So it has some information there and links to my Psychology Today blog, which is called Frazzlebrain. So I publish some psychology posts that are research based, kind of getting into neuroscience and how to help us through hard things using neuropsychology. So my next thing that I'm working on is I am working on my next book, and I am also continuing to write for Psychology Today. And I also continue to provide classes through the Oasis Institute, classes in psychology uh, related topics. I just did one on the dark triad, which is all about really dark personality traits and how to deal with those types of folks. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'd love to. I get back to everyone if they email me or send me a message through social media. I always get back to people. So, would love to hear from anyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I so appreciate you and certainly lots of takeaways and lots to think about. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Giselle.